Hello everyone. Happy October. I was originally going to read some creepypastas, but I thought that Our No Sleep was a little bit more of a modern twist on that. Just be warned that some of these stories may be unsettling, maybe triggering, but otherwise, if you're ready to join me on this spooky story session, get cozy up, maybe get a warm drink, and let's get started on these spooky stories. All of the stories I'm going to be reading are from the Reddit user u/searchandrescuewoods. Thank you. I don't sleep. That's almost not an exaggeration. I average around 2 hours every night, and that's 2 hours of good REM sleep. The kind that your body uses to fix itself. It's been getting worse for a while, but it'll go away eventually. It always has before. I just have to ride it out, keep my strings from unraveling until I can get myself glued back together. They say it's better for you to lie in bed the hours that you'd be asleep and just pretend you're asleep. It helps with the body's natural circadian rhythm. So every night, I lie in bed for 8 hours and I spend 6 of them watching the man on top of the radio tower. There's a window above my bed, and when I'm sleeping in it, I have to sit up to see out of it. I like to be aware of my surroundings, so I installed a mirror on the opposite wall to allow me to see out of it. I have blackout curtains to ensure that my sleep is as genuine as possible. But some nights, I like to leave them open so I can watch the sky. Down the road from me is a radio tower. It's the largest thing on the horizon, and at the top is a little maintenance balcony. The tower is close enough for me to see this balcony clearly. On this particular night, the blinds were cracked so that I could watch a storm approaching in the mirror, safe in bed. Heat lightning started to strobe across the sky, and it illuminated something moving on top of the radio tower. I sat up in bed and looked out the window. On the top of the tower, on the little balcony, I could see the very small shape of a man waving something. He was moving his arms in strange, rhythmic jerking patterns, facing toward the storm. I had never seen anyone on the tower before, and I couldn't think of a single reason that this man would have been there at midnight while a storm was approaching. I called the police and they'd sent someone out, but at some point, the man had left. I don't know how I missed him. He didn't come back the next night or a few weeks afterward. I thought about him a lot, though, and I kept watch every night for him. Something about it bothered me deeply, and I thought of his strange, jerking arms, the thing he'd been holding. I wasn't sleeping anyway, so I invested in a pair of binoculars, and I kept a vigil for him every single night. I didn't see him come up to the tower, but he was there as soon as it got dark. I'd already gotten my 2 hours of sleep, and now I was awake and ready. I grabbed the binoculars and brought him into focus. He was an older white man in a casual jacket. He reminded me of every single cubicle worker I'd ever seen. Nothing about him was remarkable, except the cloth he was waving, which was almost stunningly bright white. He stared vacantly out at the skyline and moved his arms in those odd, sharp movements. His mouth hung open, and even from here, I could see he hadn't shaven in some time. He blinked occasionally, but most of the time he just stared, mouth open, looking at nothing. Even though I was watching him the whole time, I didn't see him leave. He went away again for almost 2 years. The insomnia faded, and I slept very soundly without the mirror, which I had thrown out not long after the last sighting. I wasn't afraid of seeing him again. I threw it out because I couldn't stop myself from waiting for him. I could not get the man out of my thoughts. I did research into the company that owned the tower, and I knew with concrete certainty that the man did not belong to anyone in the city. He was not employed with any government agency or department. So what was he doing on the radio tower? my suspicions about him began to grow. I researched nearby airports, and he didn't belong to them, or at least no one who looked like him that night. But I felt certain that somewhere, someone would know him. I found his family in Topeka. The address on the missing persons report was still current. He had a wife and 4 children, and he was loving and he loved deeply. He had vanished on the way to his car one morning and hadn't been seen since. The night he came back, I was reading, pretending that I was choosing to stay up, and I saw the orange flag out of the corner of my eye. He was back, illuminated on the radio tower by the light of the moon. His orange flags stood out like beacons, and I grabbed my binoculars and my other hand gripping a pen. I waited until he reached the end of the message and started over again. He raised his arm as if to signal 10 o'clock. I wrote down the letter T. He held his right arm straight to the side and the left crossed over to hip level. I wrote it down. Left at knee level, right raised above the shoulder, 5 till 3. Arms at the sides, hand at knee and shoulder again. I wrote them all down. When he started over, I read the message. They're coming back again. I'd like to read a story that was titled, I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I have some stories to tell. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been a SAR officer for a few years now, and I have some stories I think you'll be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time, they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff, and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old saying, stay where you are, and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing person cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time both kids apparently had wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked her where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said that he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, and that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched the area for weeks, and it was one of the longest calls I've ever been on. We never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and her grandpa. According to her mother, her daughter had climbed into a tree to get a better view of the area. She'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere. We never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could have possibly gone, because neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down. A few times I've been out on my own, searching with a canine, and they've tried to leave me off straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Cliffs. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling. And in those cases, we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff or miles away from where the canine has led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One of the scariest things that's ever happened to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a rotten log. She was missing her shoes and her pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to our base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us, asking, "Why is the man with the big black eyes following us?" We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as a symptom of shock. But the closer we got to the base, the more agitated she seemed to become. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us up to him. We finally got her to start moving again, but we started hearing these strange guttural sounds from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of the base ops, the woman turned to me with the widest eyes I imagine a human could possibly have and said to me, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman would have seen it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear. I just jumped out of my skin. I hustled to the ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left the area for the night. This is the last one I'll tell, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every SAR unit, but in mine, it's sort of an unspoken regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it to other SAR officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point, it's just so common that it doesn't seem weird anymore. On just about every case when we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs from a house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and another officer just told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very emphatically that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them because it happens so frequently. If anyone has any theories about the stairs or seen them too, let me know. I hope you enjoyed these spooky stories, and if you want to see more, please leave a comment down below or go to Reddit r/nosleep, and you can find lots of similar stories there. Leave a comment down below of what videos you'd like to see next on my channel. I'd also love for you to check out my Patreon and also check out my Twitch. I stream Mondays and Fridays at 7:30 Eastern Time. I'd hope to see you there. We have a lot of fun. You can also check out my Etsy shop. I sell hand-designed, handmade vinyl decals as well as some jewelry that make wonderful gifts for this holiday season if you want to get started early on your shopping. Thank you so much for all your support, and I'll see you in my next video.